make haste, make haste.
Not always fast. We're not all so fast, okay? I'm carrying this very big, heavy backpack which has so much stuff.
And I am ancient. This old woman says as
we're about the same. Listen, now we're keeping pace.
You removed Grace, or whatever the fuck their name is.
Geish.
Geish.
I think it's geish.
Geish.
Like it's gayish, but just geish.
They just kind
They're
of
very gayish.
Very gayish.
All right. You guys, fuckers.
We are gay. He and I are gay. We may say
We're
this.
gay.
Oh God, what have I done? So I've been a dungeon master for over 10 years. I have never ran a module or an adventure that wasn't my own homebrew. Recently, I've been wanting to take a break. I've been wanting to pull away from my world Layfell so I can kind of relax and just still run D&D for my friends, but not have to put so much work into it. Because every week I am worrying about not only session prep, but I'm also trying to build more and more of the lore of my world because I'm really into the world building aspect. However, some of my friends have actually already ran certain adventures, and I was thinking maybe trying something that wasn't Wizards of the Coast. Luckily, one of my friends is actually really into finding random tabletop stuff and actually had a few third-party adventures to throw my way. One of which I started reading and kind of fell in love with and decided, yes, this is the one. I want to run this adventure, and plus there was an extension of it that allow you to import a bunch of the monster, character, and maps into Foundry, so I didn't have to do a lot of the prep work for the adventure. I mostly had to run it and then look at the book about what I needed to be ready for that was upcoming and make any changes that I need as a DM. So everything kind of just fell into place. But what's the adventure? It's Rise of the Drow by AAW Games. Now, I've never actually heard of these people before. I've never heard of the adventure before. I literally just was thrown this adventure by my friend and was like, yeah, I want to run it. So I purchased their content. I purchased the Foundry thing that I needed, plus a little campaign primer. Now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go ahead and start running this thing. But I had thought, this is my first time doing an adventure. And I might be an experienced dungeon master, but there's a lot of things about running an adventure that is different than running your own homebrew. And I kind of wanted to see what that would be like and then share that experience, because some people may run adventures and curious how other people run it. Thus, this is why this series exists. Going to talk about stuff that I'm planning on prepping for, stuff that happened during the session that surprised me or maybe thing I thought was funny, things like that. Talk about the inner workings of a DM trying to run an adventure like this, one who has experience DMing, but not necessarily with adventures. And please give me feedback about what you're interested from this series, because I want this to be kind of a DM insider look into setting up an adventure. I'm going to talk about struggles. I'm going to talk about mistakes. I'm going to talk about silly things. And if you guys are interested in seeing the whole sessions, let me know. My players are very much okay with doing so. What is Rise of the Drow? To give the quick TLDR, dirty details, the quick thing, essentially you are playing in a town called Ribalka. At least this is where you're going to start. Ribalka is an iron mining town between the Klevek Empire and the Vic Mordair. These two nations have been warring for a while, and this iron town is kind of a middle point between the two. There's these two large mountain ranges that kind of separate them, and Ribalka is between these two big mountains. Right now, the town's under the Klevek Empire's rule, and so this town has a rich history of a warring two kingdoms, and the residents there is a mixture of the two cultures and starting their first generation of what they're calling the Ribalkians. But that's not the important part. This is just where you're starting, because what's happening underneath the ground is where the adventure is really going to get started. See, there's a Drow Empire underneath that's actually starting to expand outward, grabbing people and bringing it to their main city. Why? Because they got some soul-sacrificing entities and they're trying to get a power grab. So obviously, what are you going to do? You're going to go upstairs, find some humans and think, hey, this works. They got souls, why not use them? So the adventure begins with the party arriving in the town for various reasons, and then, well, oh crap, the Drow's attacking. They're kidnapping people, and they have to figure out, oh, Drow are trying to kill us. They're trying to kidnap us. Why are they doing this? And then our heroes go to the Underdark and chase them down, eventually probably facing a bunch of Drow and a lot of powerful entities and a lot of creatures that the Underdark has. Now, I chose this adventure because this was not just a giant dungeon crawl. There is actually a lot of social encounters, a lot of exploring to do, stuff that I think is interesting for all players included. For the sake of the rules, we are sticking to the 2024 5e because I've not really ran that. I've been mostly running 2014 with a few changes and of course homebrew changes I've had over the last 10 years. So this I'm actually trying to use a lot of 2024 rules, try to see how it feels while running this new adventure. Still have some homebrew stuff that I'm wanting to keep to because I really like it and I think it makes the game more fun. And finally, we are running on Foundry. I fell in love with Foundry a long time ago, and I'm still running it to this day. So, let's first have an introduction of the characters that will be playing in this adventure. First, we have Grasha, our orc druid.
Oh, shit. Guys, I only rolled a 13. Okay. This is Grasha. Yeah, I know we're level 1. How do I introduce Grasha? I don't know her personality yet. She's pretty cool, pretty chill. She's a druid. Probably later on will be a land druid, circle of land, because I'm a basic bitch. She's a tall, large lady. Clearly, she's orcish. You know, she's a patient person. She kind of hangs to the back observing, but that doesn't mean she's like shy or anything. She's more calculating than you would expect somebody who's connected to the land to be. She's wearing mostly green stuff that matches her skin. She's got, squinting in, she's got some tattoos on her, some jewelry, long brown hair. She's always got like some flowers or greenery and shit braided into her hair, but she often speaks in like absolute bullshit, like parables.
Oh boy.
That are more for fun than anything, because she likes to make it seem like she's much more learned and smart than she is, but she's at her core still dressed an orcish lady. And she's traveling around to learn the knowledge of the ancestral spirits and stuff like that. She's cool. She's chill. We'll figure her out as you go. And that's Grasha. Grasha, I don't know. Say it how you want. Does she have an accent? We'll figure it out when she talks.
Oh, it's amazing. All right. Then we have Tatiana, our shifter fighter.
Hi, this is Tatiana, and a fox, and have blonde hair, and lovely mismatched eyes. Got, some good old heavy armor and a glaive on the back with a long sword on the hip, and yeah. I
can heat.
People.
Then we have Svetlana, our Aasimar paladin.
Hello, this is Svetlana. I will never expect anyone here to pronounce her last name. It's just there because that's her last name. Svetlana is a short Aasimar woman with a fairly muscular build. She's about 5'3". She has long, wavy, blonde hair, golden eyes, and pale white skin. She's currently clad in chainmail with a blue tabard that depicts star and constellation iconography all over it. Same with the scarf around her neck, the outer portions of her shield. However, at the center of her shield, she bears the symbols for Arnott and Flaceros. She follows both. You guys would also know that she's ethnically from the Klavic Empire, but in terms of culturally, she's much more towards her religious leanings. She's very kind, honestly, probably kind to a fault. She tends to always, she has this prevailing belief that people that do bad things are just misguided and that they need to be guided to a better path. As such, killing people is something she rarely does. That's what the rest of you are for, surely.
Then finally, we also have our dwarf bard, Stega.
Everything is subject to change.
Of course.
Everything. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple things that are not changing. This is exactly what she looks like. She changes her pants every day, so it doesn't matter what they look like today. So they're going to be different tomorrow. This isn't actually metal, it's leather. It's just up here you can get metal, or you can get leather that looks like it's metal because she's a bard and she's wearing leather armor. She keeps a very, very, very short cropped goatee. She's got a really nice mustache. She's got the chin strap goes to the goatee. Very, very clean. She keeps her hair in some type of braid at all times. She's got her little eyebrow piercing. She doesn't wear a ton of makeup, but she wears a little mascara, and she keeps her lips moisturized because it's cold. You gotta have your lips moisturized. She loves to talk. so much. That's all I've decided right now. She's from here. She was born here in Rabalka. Why she was not here in the first place, we haven't decided. But she was born here. Oh, and she has a flute.
Oh.
She's probably the tallest dwarf you've ever met. She's 5 foot even.
Whoa.
We also have a 5th player, but they were not able to make it in this last session, so they will be a secret until next time. So there we go. We have our players, we have our adventure. How did the first session go? I would say it actually went pretty decently. My players had fun. That's the important part. I also had fun, which is also very important. What was strange for me was that since I've been running my own homebrew world, running another world felt kind of strange because details of the landscape and other things are unfamiliar to me because I don't know necessarily what all is in this world, which is fine. I don't need to know everything. And honestly, Rise of Drow is kind of a classic adventure, so a lot of the stereotypes that come with D&D are in here. Dwarves and humans and Drow, like how they are kind of depicted in classic adventures, are very much similar in this one. Except, the Klevek's very Russian coded, and Vic Mordair have a lot of northern cultures kind of mashed all together, but otherwise not very alien to me. Still, I found myself having trouble describing scenes that weren't fully described out in the book, forgetting to get into detail about certain buildings and how the landscape looked around them. At least that's how I felt when I was running it. But that's okay. It's the first session. I'm learning how to kind of run an adventure because I'm staring at this book. I have prepped for it. I've been reading it and ready to kind of like work with the book and not necessarily have to follow it to the very T. However, this comes to my first mistake. Generally, when I run my own session, I have what I like to call a splattering of notes. Usually it's a list of important figures, details that I know that I need to touch on when I run in the session. And in this case, I had forgotten to put together my splattering of notes, and I didn't have much in front of me except for the book itself. And may I say, that is not how you want to run a game. Sure, it worked out, but honestly, if I was not as experienced as I was, I feel like this would overwhelm somebody. It can be kind of a lot to kind of scroll through all the pages and try to figure out where you need to be, what kind of detail you need to give. You don't want to give the wrong information. Because I had read it, I know I had some of it in my head, but some things I still had to look up, and I felt bad. I kind of had to like keep looking around for what I needed. But again, that's okay. We learning. This is the first session. I'll be okay. I'll just make sure I have my splattering of notes in front of me next time. What's funnier is I actually started off the session with all my players together on a boat coming into the town. Now, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. The thing has a dock, so like boats come here. But technically our adventurers came from farther away and to respond to a message they got from a diplomat, which leads into the adventure later on. However, I didn't consider the fact that the lake that they technically would have been traveling on is very dangerous. Our players are level 1. This adventure is a level 1 to 15. And after reading about the river after the first session, I realized them showing up on the boat didn't really make sense because there would have been a lot of dangers and these people probably would not be level 1. But fuck it. You know what they did? They showed up on a boat. There they are. Oh well. But also, the boatman kind of added a new complication because the adventure kind of starts off with a isolation feel in the city because the adventure wants you to go to the church. There's a ceremony going on. You should feel like isolated. It seems cold and dark. And then there's citizens going into it. In fact, there's a citizen's like, what are you doing out here? Come on, get in here. I realized that when the boatman showed up at the city and I was like, oh crap. Yeah, the boatman knows about the ceremony. It's like, come on, guys, you're going to be late. And my players are here like, wait, what ceremony? And I'm like, look, the boatman knows what's going on. Just follow him or explore the village if you want. I left the option up to them whether or not they wanted to follow the boatman. They could have explored Rabalka and realized everything is closed and everything is dark. And if they left this town, they would have been attacked. But luckily, my players took the hook and was like, all right, we'll follow the boatman. Overall, the boatman wasn't actually a big problem, but it's kind of one of those things where I know in the background doesn't make a lot of sense. I probably should have just had them walk into town, but honestly, it ultimately doesn't matter. My players probably wouldn't even care, but I care, but I shouldn't care. It's one of those dumb DM things. Other dungeon masters, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So my players have entered the church. Our heroes are here in this town because they are responding to a missive from a diplomat so they can help them with their problem. But that's not what's happening right away. What's going to happen is they enter the church. There's a ceremony going on called the Vigil of Light, where a very powerful artifact called the Moonstone is going to be utilized to bring the new coming dawn after the longest, darkest night of this world, or at least in this area. However, the Drow know about this artifact, and they want two things. They want that artifact, and two, they want the people that's in the church. So they kind of have this complicated plan to, one, get that moon shard, but two, get those people so they can take them back home. But there's a third catch. The moon shard is actually sentient and is all about balance, and it wants to be kidnapped by the Drow because apparently good has been too good for a while. We need some chaos up in here. So essentially what's happening at the church is that our players get to talk to the civilians, able to figure out more things about the ceremony, maybe the town, around the area, all your usual stuff, and eventually the ceremony begins. Catch is the ceremony has to be uninterrupted, but it gets interrupted twice. Technically 3 times, but we only ran up to the second interruption. The first time, a bunch of adventurers come in, they're injured, and one is petrified, and it gives the players an option to decide, do we want to help them? Do we want to interact with these people? Show that we are kind to the other civilians. My players very much were. They charge forward and try to heal and talk to these people. This was also another issue I ran into. I knew about these adventurers, but the VTT import that I got from AAW Games does not include tokens or anything for these adventurers. These are technically level 1 adventurers that could be played, and in the primer you can actually find some of their character sheets in there, which I did utilize. However, I didn't have tokens or anything, and I had to scramble to get all their notes and descriptions. This is another reason why you need to make sure you have your notes in front of you, because it's a lot easier to look at it than trying to flip through the book and be like, oh yeah, this is this guy, this is this guy. Again, my players were okay with it. It was a little confusing at one point, but eventually we got it all figured out, and my players were able to save all of their lives. It was great. Then following up, the second interruption happened. 2 of my players were actually still with the injured individuals, even though they're all fine and healed. They were just standing by, and 2 returned back to their seats. A group of hunters come in, trying to burn down the church, with one of the hunters being a secret Drow. Ooh. And this is where they have their big first combat. Level 1 characters versus 8 hunters who aren't actively necessarily trying to kill them. They more or less just want to burn down the church so people freak out and leave. My players actually got very creative on this combat. One, the druid, Grasha, she was able to lock down a lot of them with a good spell. I think entangling roots. I can't remember it now that I'm recording. It'll be on the screen. She managed to lock a lot of them down, and the main priest there was asking, please do not kill these hunters. They're obviously under some kind of curse. And my players listened. They're like, all right, bet, we're not going to kill them, which led to a little awkward situation. Some of the casters were like, well, I don't really want to go into melee, but they didn't want to cast cantrips because they could have killed them. So what did they do? They got creative. They used Presty and Druidcraft to basically smother their torches, which was kind of funny because now that these hunters are sitting here wait, I am being compelled to burn down this church. Now I don't have a torch and I'm in ruined gear. What am I supposed to do now? I roleplay them as these are crazed hunters. They're probably upset. So I had to go grab unarmed strikes, put it in their character sheet, and then have them try to go strangle the players that took away their fire. There was also the situation eventually, some of them realized, oh wait, there's all this plant life. We can just burn it. However, because they had hunters that were all tied up in it, they didn't immediately try to burn all the plants because then they would burn their friends. They might be compelled to burn down the church, but they're not necessarily compelled to kill each other by setting themselves on fire. They're not going to burn themselves alive for the cause. They still have the sense of, I'm going to live. At least that's kind of how I took it, because they were under the spell Suggestion. And Suggestion is a reasonable request, although I do wonder how the Drow convinced these hunters to burn down this church to bring the light, considering this ceremony, Vigil of Light, is actually what helps with everything. And it's been successful for years, no problem. Why are they doing this? Why was that Suggestion successful? Who knows? I don't care. They're crazy. Let's find out. My party members did realize one of them was a Drow, and they managed to bring attention to them, which then the Drow dimension doored out of the church. And that's kind of where the session ended. So that's where we are. So what's next? Well, luckily, the ceremony will complete. I said there was a third interruption, but technically the interruption is an after thing. So how the ceremony apparently works is the main priest has this moon shard. He does a whole thing, summons a Archon lantern, which I guess in a way brings the new coming dawn. Well, because the Moon Shard wants to be kidnapped, it tricks the main priest and summons something called a hooded Archon lantern. What ends up happening is this lantern like super blasts the main priest and he goes down. This becomes like a weird little mini boss fight for our level 1 adventures. After which, Durandor, the main priest, realizes his moon shard fell through the cracks in the floor and needs to go down to the basement to find where the hell it went. But also his church is being burned above because an acolyte came down and said there's fire. So he's like, hey, fellow adventurers, can you please go save my church and go upstairs and stop it? And is going downstairs to go after the moon shard. One, I just think it's funny that there was a big enough crack for this very powerful artifact to just kind of slip through, which allows the drow to get it and escape. So I now have to basically prep for my players to have like a mini boss fight and then have to go to the top of the church to stop some fire mephits and storm crows for burning down the church, because there's these large bells that they're trying to burn the infrastructure around that will collapse and fall into the church. Overall, this is pretty straightforward stuff. Maybe a little silly if you think about it, but otherwise I really like it. Also, another thing about this adventure that I really like is two things. One, there's a sense of urgency and timing. In fact, there are some times where there's like a schedule of the enemies, what they're doing, so if the players take too long, you kind of know where the enemies are at. And in this case, there's a sense of urgency because the tower is burning. Now, it doesn't explicitly say how long it's going to take for everything to burn down until the players reach the area, and then it makes you roll dice to see how many rounds it takes before the thing collapses. What's interesting is there's a lot of rooms between where they start and where this tower is. Technically, the players can spend a lot of time exploring the church and getting a lot of loot and be able to build themselves up, which I think is kind of intended. In fact, there's a certain point where an acolyte will actually come to the party when they reach the top, and if they've been helping the church, like they helped those adventurers that were injured earlier and have been very kind to the people, one of the acolytes will tell them, hey, Durandor has an armory, you should go in there and grab what you can to go deal with these threats. Plus there's like healing items everywhere that you can kind of like pick up. My plan to kind of deviate from the book is to actually do the following. I'm going to have a background doom timer. I'm going to roll how many rounds it's going to take before the tower falls, but I'm not going to start rolling those rounds until the players get to a certain point. Essentially what I'm going to do is basically like a point system. Every time the players enter a room and try to do something with the room, say explore it, one of those points ticks down. Eventually, the acolyte will run into them no matter where they are upstairs, as long as they're on the pathway to the tower. The acolyte will run into them and tell them what's going on. That's when the timer begins. So I basically giving them the chance where they can loot and they can look around, but I don't want them to be able to go to each room and do like an investigation to find what's all in there. Because if they're searching every single room before they reach the tower, that kind of pressure that, hey, the church is burning down, hey, we're being under attack, isn't there. Now, knowing my players, they'll probably respond to the threat and realize this before I even have to say anything or before the acolyte will show up. I have a feeling they're going to try very hard to get there very quickly, but maybe do some quick searching around just so they can have some extra stuff. But we'll see. Either way, when the acolyte shows up, they realize, oh crap, we're running out of time. I'll be honest, I don't know if they're going to make it all the way to the fight. They might make it all the way to the fight at the top of the tower, which is a few fire mephits and storm crows. The fire mephits don't really care about the players too much. They more or less care about burning down the church tower. The storm crows, on the other hand, if they get too close, they will attack the players. So mostly my next prep is A, prepare for the kind of mini boss fight the players are going to have. 2, Durandor going to separate from the players and tell them to go upstairs to save his church, and them going through these various rooms trying to reach the tower. They have a long list of rooms and what they kind of have in them. The map is a little bare bones, which is fine. I can do all the descriptions. I just need to know what the hell the room is. Figure out if my players are going to loot, whether or not the acolyte's going to help them. The acolyte will help them. They have actually done enough that I feel like the acolyte is going to tell them where Durandor's armory is, unless they are a total douchebag to the acolyte itself, which I really doubt, but you know, could happen. And then I think they're going to eventually make it there. I don't know if they're going to make it to the fight. That really depends on how much exploring my players do. So I think next sessions could be pretty straightforward. Kind of talked about what we're getting into, the adventure. I hope my next few episodes I can get more into about what I'm doing, anything that might be important. Again, please let me know what is interesting to you. What part of setting up the game are you interested in? Or things that I run into. I'm going to try my best to break down things that I think are interesting, but not necessarily have to give the play-by-play about everything we do. Otherwise, these videos are going to be very, very long. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.